So I love I love this allegory of the cave, this concept that Plato, it's like a conversation Plato was having with Socrates, I think, and kind of around the how we interpret knowledge and how we receive knowledge through our senses, and what happens when we're presented with new knowledge. How do we kind of both individually and collectively, how do we receive new information, new truths? And so, a quick review. So the cave was a conversation he was having with Socrates where he was kind of likening our ability to receive knowledge and how we receive knowledge to, he was saying, so suppose you were somebody who was raised captive in a cave and you really just lived that way. You really just lived on kind of one part of this cave, and the only information you received was through your senses. And he said, imagine, you had captors, and any sort of information that you would have would come in the form of these shadow puppets that would be presented on the wall of the cave. The captors would be using a fire as a source of light, and they would be using shadow puppets to kind of create these. So this might be anything from, the stories of the Titans, the stories of the Olympic gods, Zeus fighting with Poseidon, or some sort of battle, or it could be, kind of two birds flying along, and another little bird pops out. Oh, that's how we procreate. That's how birds create a new bird. So whatever it was, essentially he was talking about how we receive knowledge and information. He said, okay, so say that's your experience. You've lived your whole life as this captive on this side of this wall. All of your information has come through your five senses, and you've had kind of, pictures telling you stories on this wall through these shadow puppets from, dictated and created from your captors. He said, so imagine if a couple of slaves that way got out of the cave, all of a sudden, boom, there's light, there's plants, there's animals, there's fresh air. If they were to come back in to try to help you get out, how we receive new information, and this has been talked about even up until, now, kind of how we receive new information. Schopenhauer said, all truths pass through three filters before, they become widely accepted. He said, first, they're roundly rejected. So there's a truth that comes in. Think about when you're raising your children and you're telling your kid, like I remember telling my son, when he got his first geared up bike, I was kind of trying to explain to him he's got 6 gears. It's like, okay, so when you're on the flats, be thinking about third and fourth gear, but you can also kind of get into 6 and see what it is to be in a harder gear when you're on the flats. Now, when you're going uphill, you want to start dropping into the easier gears. When you're going downhill, you drop into the harder gears. That way you can, keep kind of pedal rotation and control. And I remember just going in one ear and out the other. And then we went on a camping trip, and he was able to go for multiple hours on their bikes with his buddies. And he came back and he was telling us these stories. They were going uphill, they were going downhill. And I was like, hey, like, what was your gearing? What were you in? He said, oh, well, Arthur told me, he told me one of his 11-year-old friends was telling him, and he was able to receive that information. So you think about when you're raising kids and you're telling them information, and sometimes they reject it, they dismiss it. We often have these filters about how we're going to receive information. So Schopenhauer said we pass through three filters. First, it's roundly rejected. Second, like it's ridiculed, it's made fun of, like it's really kind of it's really dismissed. And then the third filter is it becomes accepted as common sense. So these filters of how we receive information, through our senses, through things that we think we already know, prior beliefs. So Plato's idea was that if some captors were able to get away, they were able to come in and try to rescue their fellow captors that were still in there, that there would be that resistance. So it's a great infographic that kind of discusses like how humans receive and how we prioritize and categorize knowledge. I think there's a much deeper meaning to this if you can get through it, because as it is 2024, and kind of Western science and quantum physics is kind of trying to understand the nature of reality, and potentially there's do we live in a matrix? Do we live in a simulation? And in kind of the spiritual kind of healing community, there are these concepts that we create the nature of our reality, whether it's acutely, individually, or collectively as a whole. Somehow, through our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions, prior beliefs, beliefs about the world, beliefs about ourselves, that somehow we've got this feedback loop, whether it's, the magnetic attraction of our emotions and our feelings kind of giving us this continuous feedback loop, or our beliefs, right? If the world is unfair, if, I'm not lucky, I'm always losing, somebody's out to get me. Like, we have this kind of continuous feedback loop that then kind of creates what we believe, kind of what we're feeling going out into the world, and then it kind of being mirrored back to us. This concept that we create the whole of our reality instead of being at effect, like the world's coming in and it's happening to us. We're at cause. We're creating our reality. So this concept is interesting. If you think about the cave, it's like another way to view this allegory, this Plato allegory is, our consciousness is like the fire, right? Our consciousness is emanating out from us. And if you think about these shadow puppets, it's our feelings, our thoughts, our beliefs, our emotions are kind of these puppets, and what we see on this back wall, the shadows that we see, we've created. So the reality we're experiencing, if you're looking at the wall with all the shadows, goddamn, I keep making it opposite. If we look at that wall with all those shadows, these are our creations. So whatever we're feeling and thinking, we're creating, and then the world is just reflecting that back to us. And it's an interesting way to take kind of ownership in our lives and to recognize I am in control. I can do the work to either create my reality through clearing out wherever dysfunction is inside me, changing my limiting beliefs, changing my self-talk to more positive, having that more positive, things are always working out for me, right? The mantras, the law of attraction, right? The law of attraction is big, that kind of promotes this same concept. And then I think the other part of this, it would appear potentially that there are at least kind of groups of humans who've kind of passed this information down along and kind of kept this to themselves, this nature of reality and how we create our reality, and have potentially kept it for themselves for their personal gain, right? So this is these conspiracy theories of like the elites, the Illuminati, right? This kind of global fear where there's a sect of people who feel separated from the world, who feel separated from the tribe, and who kind of wanted to keep this information to themselves for their own gain. And I think, the approach is similar to how a kid, like if a kid is, imagine a kid wet his pants on the playground, like the way to approach that kid, it's like that that old teacher who can come and just wrap her sweater around him and bring him to the office so they can call his parents and get him new clothes. Or his buddy who says, hey, wrap my sweatshirt around your waist, let's go to the office and call your parents so you can get new clothes. Like, it's when we can be in that place of compassion, empathy, forgiveness, love, not only does that kind of put us into our power position, right? But that's the same way that we would approach kind of that healing journey for ourselves, right? When we start to recognize that the dysfunction we see in our lives and in the world around us is actually caused by some sort of dysfunction within here, right? So that's when a lot of people start turning to that healing journey, because when you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, it's like, okay, I've got to make some changes. What am I in control of? Well, I'm in control of me. So I think taking that similar approach, because when you're looking, whether you're going to 12-step therapy, personal growth, ayahuasca, like the place that we're going to get the most growth out of is when we're coming from that place of love, forgiveness, empathy, compassion. And so I think, that separation that potentially, some group of humans have passed this information along for 6,000 years and kept it to themselves for that personal gain. It's not through like violent revolution, because when have you solved anything when you weren't kind to yourself, when you weren't kind to your children, versus when you're approaching things from a place of empathy and compassion and forgiveness. So I think the cave, Plato's cave, is a really great kind of conversation on, one, like how we receive information, how we categorize it as knowledge, and also two, this kind of deeper dive into the nature of reality where, sure, that's one kind of simplistic way to look at how we receive new information and how we categorize knowledge, right? Through our senses. We're the captives. We look at these shadow puppets. Okay, that's a truth. That's a truth. Well, if I'm looking at it, it must be true. Versus taking that deeper meaning into this allegory of the cave, recognizing, oh, wait a minute, like my consciousness is the fire, is the light. And whatever I'm seeing on that wall, I've created through shadow puppets, through my beliefs, the emotions that predominate my experience, the beliefs, the thoughts that I have, the repetitive thoughts that I have. I'm not good enough. The world is unfair. The world is unsafe. Someone's out to get me. That person's lucky. I'm not lucky. I don't have the skills to that, right? Those limiting beliefs or positive beliefs, you probably know some people that are just winning all the time. Those shadow puppets for them, are probably serving them, right? The Tony Robbins theory, the Joe Dispenza, right? This idea that, well, now, wait a minute, I can be in control of the shadow puppets. I can be in control of the thoughts, the feelings. Generally, that starts when we go in to clear out whatever dysfunction is inside us, right? That's why guys are going to 12-step. They're going to men's groups. They're going to therapy. They're trying ketamine, therapy for PTSD. They're microdosing. They're macrodosing. They're doing something. They're starting to do something to recognize, okay, the only thing I can control is myself and how I show up in the world, right? And so when you get on that road, that road of healing or clearing out whatever dysfunction lives inside, it's with compassion, it's with empathy, it's with love. The same way you approach the kid in the most successful way to get the outcome that you and the kid deserve. Is the same way that you approach, your healing journey. And I think that acute healing journey also can be mimicked in kind of this collective healing journey. And so I love the cave, this allegory, for that reason.